Welcome to the Riff. Today on the Riff, Jeremy and Justin sit down and talk about power. What is power useful for? When does power become toxic? And what do you look for to make sure power isn't something that is abused? We hope today is helpful and hopeful. Thanks for listening.
Welcome, Riff listeners. Man, I got to tell you, sometimes Sunday is the longest day of the week. Because
it's the same amount of hours.
Well, okay, I didn't say that right.
No, okay.
Sometimes Sunday feels as if it is longer than the others, even though scientifically it's the same as the others.
Okay.
Because I can't wait till Monday morning. I get a little notification on my phone that says there's another Riff episode, and it's not lost on me that today some people woke up before their alarm because of this. And they got that, as soon as they got that, they probably tripped over a coffee table, accidentally stepped on an animal or something, in their rush to be one of the first listeners.
Do you think there's riffraff out there that don't go to bed on a Sunday night?
Yeah.
Just kind of like a
sleep intense,
like in line, like for a Harry Potter, but it's, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, like a book release at a Borders.
Yes,
that's not really a Barnes and Noble thing of me to say, is it?
Yeah,
absolutely. Well, hey, so thank you for your patience, and we've got an influx really of emails saying, "Hey, can you start releasing those on Sunday?" And honestly, no, we have a rhythm. So
I'm sorry, I haven't been listening. I got a splinter from the podcast table.
Really?
Yeah, but I'm gonna keep going.
I call them slivers. What's the difference between a splinter and a sliver besides where you're born?
One is the right way you say it, and one is the wrong way you say it.
Okay, so sliver is the right way, but a lot of people around here say splinter.
No, it's a splinter.
Really quick, if you are watching this online with a lot of other people, because you created a social group like COVID, go ahead and take some time in the chat and talk about splinter or sliver. But it's
not a sliver. You're saying it's for real? Are you for real right now? Sliver? I got a sliver in my hand.
I feel like this is a reality TV show. Of course, that's what a sliver is.
All right.
You say splinter.
Yeah, I don't know. We had an argument about pizza rolls and bagel bites the other week.
Yeah.
And now it's this. I don't know. I just feel like we're falling apart.
Yeah, that's all right.
I'm sorry. I have a sliver. There you go. I'll concede.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Okay, so we were talking this morning about power.
Yes.
Power, and as it relates to faith. And I would say as a general rule, from the outside looking in when it comes to faith, people don't think that people of faith should have more power, that power struggles, power perversions, power misuse of power seems to be a common topic among challenges. At the same time, it feels like people when it comes to their personal faith, seem to want more of it. So we're going to talk about that.
Yes, we are.
What does that look like? So,
I dig it. I've been able to be in a couple different environments and scenarios in the past 2 or 3 weeks.
Yes.
And they've all been very different, right? I mean, when we brought Ofer in, we got to go to a multi-site conference. We've been in a lot of different spaces.
In Cleveland.
Beautiful
Shout out Cleveland listeners.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
We had a very, very interesting Uber driver in Cleveland.
Really
I don't know
if
we have time, if we have enough room in our lack of content today to talk about our Uber driver. His first question
was not, how are you?
No.
It wasn't, what's your name?
And I would say social awareness. Is it Daniel Goldman that does a lot of talk on social awareness? I don't think he had read him.
He's not, man.
No. His first question was?
So? What's your take on Christian nationalism?
That was an odd question.
That's an odd question to start with.
So we both looked at each other.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, I actually am not a big fan of it. But nice to meet you. And from that point on, I watched our route closely. Make sure we were going straight to the airport because that guy, one, sweet as I will get out, but also had the charm that he could pull out a knife and control our locks from the front of the door of the car. But anyway, that was Cleveland. So
okay, well, you talk about that even, Christian nationalism.
Yeah, right? That was his first thought, Christian nationalism.
So it seems like people like power.
Yeah.
And it also seems like no matter where you fall, even if you're however religious you are, not religious, whatever you want to call it, it seems like a lot of circles that I've been in that might be a little bit different claim Jesus. Meaning, Jesus is for me, my agenda, what we are doing. So when you talk about Christian nationalism, same exact idea, right?
Yeah.
So it's very interesting to walk through that. So I just kind of want to get your take on that. We've seen a ton of documentaries come out over the past years. We've seen podcasts. We've seen all of these things, and they really do have a lot in common, and it's power, which is interesting.
Misuse of it,
Because at the end of all this, we really lose all of our power, right?
Yeah.
It's,
So, okay, so Jesus, I mean, the whole point, and we see this in Philippians, it's this stripping of power that Jesus was, who being in the very form of God did not consider equality with God something to be grasped, is the verse there. And what it means is he took upon himself the form of a servant, that even though being fully God and fully man, he chose to strip himself of some of the power that he had the right to, in order to be among us and really to model for us that we don't need to have this insane amount of power to characterize our life as much as we have to have this insane amount of drive towards purpose and mission and serving others. And somehow we feel like the first thing that Jesus did is stripped himself of power. And sometimes we think the first thing we must put on is this power. And it's totally different than what we see in Scripture. And so that'll be interesting. One of the things I think it would be helpful is, as we talked, we talked with Ofer in so many settings. Well, he's one of my only friends that I know who comes from an Arab world. And one of the things he was talking about power. He was even talking about American politics because he doesn't understand American politics. And if you were at any of our events and you cornered Ofer, you probably had a similar conversation. But sometimes outside of America, our politics look interesting. And one of the conversations is, why would you choose a president or an elected official, could be beyond a president, based on character or based on how they're going to serve the community? Because in the eyes of a global perspective, it should be all about power, right? Who can scare countries the most? Who's the most likely to press a button when they get mad? And that should become your power, because I think if I don't have fear, I can't have honor. But once I fear you, now I can honor you, which is probably a mindset that is common among the world. And I listen to that and I'm thinking, man, that's so bizarre to me, to think our politics should be all about who's the most unpredictable and scary person. Let's put them in charge. And I get it. I get that power works, right?
Yeah.
My first thing I think through is, what if we did that as parents? Talk to me about the power dynamic, because I know you're girls and they're strong, but I just feel like during this season of life, won't always be this way, but you're probably stronger.
Right.
Talk to me about parenting and power dynamics.
I think there's a shift of power, right? I don't remember who I was listening to. It might have been a Ramsey thing. It might have been Tim Ferriss, somebody.
I talk about stuff a lot too.
That could have been Jeremy Johnson. Yeah,
no, but it is probably not important.
But they were talking about this idea of tug of war. And Jamie does the thing of dropping the rope when you're in an argument. And this person was talking about this idea of power and struggle.
Talk to me. I'm still lost. I want to know more about that. I like that.
In an argument, In an argument, you're in a tug of war. At some point, somebody's got to drop a rope. Like someone has to drop it.
I've never heard that.
Yeah,
I like that.
Who's going to be the one to drop the rope? And not necessarily say, I concede, but say, let's stop. Because what we're arguing over is probably silly. So I'm going to drop the rope. We're going to come back to this and we're going to meet in the middle and we're going to talk about it. Because we're trying to tug this thing back and forth and nobody's going to win. So Jamie does a lot of that stuff with parenting and with coaching. And I heard on a podcast, it was very similar to that, but it was like this idea of release of power when parenting. So where you imagine this rope that you have, and you have it extremely tight, and this kiddo...
Taut.
Right?
Is what I always...
When they're 6, you can kind of tug that rope and move them wherever they want. You've got all the power. Right?
Okay.
When they're 10, you kind of feel a little bit of tension. And you're like, whoa. When they're 18, you feel a lot of tension.
Yeah.
When they're 25, it's tight as can be. So if you're not letting go of the rope as they start pulling and you guide them, something at the end is going to break, right? So it'd be the same thing with power. It'd be the same thing or the same thing with any situation. So if I'm in a space where I hold the power 100% of the time, it will break. And I think that's why Jesus said a ton of times, fear not, right? There's something about him and about how he gave power away that is so fascinating to me, because there's something about it. There's something about holding that power and harnessing it and controlling it. Like, you're not going to control it forever. You're going to die, right? And again, I believe in resurrection. I believe in all this, but at the end of the day, your hands will be old, fragile, and weak, and you can no longer hold the rope. So you got to let go anyways. So it's just a fascinating illustration with that piece. So I just find it very interesting when people are trying to hold on to power and they want to grasp it. I think you do such a good job of leading the team with, you always talk about open hands, right? And I think that's where that comes from, is like this idea that if you hold this and you just hang on to it because, man, I'm in control, it's so toxic.
Yeah.
So talk to me about that. Like you lead that way. I've heard you multiple times in staff settings about this open-handed approach. How did you form that? What does that do for you?
Well, I feel like I had some great leaders early in my life. And so for me, most of my leadership examples have been fairly positive. I've had a couple very negative, or I've had some examples that I've been able to work with and work closely with of leaders I don't want to be like, but not very many. And even with them, I learned a lot. And just putting it together, just this idea of leaders early on who are high relational. They would lead with the carrot, not the stick vibe. And then I was attracted to that. Now, the challenge for me is I could not bring some clarity, because weak leadership could just be nice leadership too. And so for me, a lot of times what I have to do is say, hey, here's the deal. I don't need to be a jerk, but I do need to be clear. And just because I'm nice doesn't mean I'm being a good leader. And just because I'm getting you to do something doesn't mean I'm a good leader. So what I have to do is I want to be honoring and add dignity to whomever I have the opportunity to work with. At the same time, we got to do something. We got to get there. Parenting, you talk about parenting, that's a big deal. Looking back, and I've shared this many times, the most embarrassing parts of parenting as I look back are when I would use power, because we have power. Mm-hmm. We have power. Right. And honestly, the quickest way to get something done is to use power. 100%. Because if you can scare or shame or bully your way to do something, it is effective. And so the problem is we use that as our, when I was playing video games growing up, you can have that nitro gas, right? And you can push the trigger or whatever it is.
What game were you playing?
A lot of times I would play Bob's Burgers. And so if you're trying to, it's going down a conveyor belt and you've got to like build these burgers and you hit the nitro and you get extra power, but it's limited, right? So this, basically I think as a parent in that kind of relationship or a boss, you can yell, you can demand, and it'll get the job done.
Yep.
And it's effective in short spurts, but it weakens. So we're in a setting where Janaea's dog is back at our house for a while. Well, we don't have a fence.
You a dog guy?
No, I'm not a dog guy.
Really?
Yeah, not a dog guy at all.
Okay.
Yeah, no. Doesn't get to my heart at all.
You've always told me that, and you've always said that, and I don't know. I don't know. I've just seen you with Millie, and I don't know. I think you might be a dog guy.
I'll tell you what. I got a bounty out there if you can prove that I am, because I'm not a dog guy.
Okay.
But here's you're acting as if you have a video that I heard about.
I don't have anything on you. I'm just saying I think you
clearly
might be
not a dog guy.
Okay,
But
all right.
but I have to be now, right? So I fake it. So we don't have a fence, right? So we live, like, I don't need a fence for Leanne, okay? Like, if she wants to go, like, get the mail, I'm not, like, thinking she's going to run away. So we have...
She's come a long way, man.
She's done so well. We got to call her. But, so like, we live in this environment where we don't need fences. All of a sudden, Millie doesn't play by those rules. So we have to do a leash every time we go out. Well, so Janaea is a lot nicer than I am. So Janaea puts on this harness. It's like a 10-minute process to get Millie ready to go out. So that way, if Millie runs, it just kind of hugs her torso. And it's like, oh, I'm running to, and it's a hug, right? No big deal. So I'm like, if I have to go out at 5:15 in the morning to let Millie out, I'm not spending 10 minutes to wrestle her into some type of harness. So I just clip the leash onto her collar.
Ooh.
And so Janaea doesn't like that,
Barbarian.
she's like, if she runs or you have to pull, it's going to be on her esophagus. And I'm like, yeah, I'm aware of that. It's a risk I'm willing to take. Now, before you get upset with me, I care about my daughter and the dog enough to say I won't do that. So, but here's what I know: as we're walking, if she starts barking or she wants to run, I realize I can pull, and it will effectively get her to come back to me, right? And if I do that, one, you can damage. So what you got to do is you got to have some of that tension. You got to lead, but lead in such a way where you're not hurting someone. All that to say is, parenting, it's a big deal. Whatever work, it's a big deal. Is we can't use the ability to make someone obey, make someone do what we want them to do in a way that's going to hurt them. And when it comes to faith, it's the same way. That's where the Crusades get it all messed up. If I could paint a cross on my weapons, all of a sudden I think I'm doing God a solid. Convert or die. That's a famous saying. Convert or die. Like, you either follow my God or I'm going to kill you right now. One, it's a terrible evangelism strategy, but it was effective for some because people would be like, yeah, don't kill me. But is it really effective? I mean, it's ridiculous. So obviously, obviously we wouldn't do that. Of course people would do that because that is a natural progression. But what does that look like nowadays? How am I using power in my in faith? So in nowadays culture, what are some things we see of people who abuse their power and they're not using it in a way that's serving?
I think this brings up, the podcasts, the documentaries that I brought up, it seems that all of those, and if I'm talking about Hillsong and Mars Hill and all of these pieces,
Shiny Happy
people, Happy people. All of these, right, seem to have Jesus on their side. They're claiming Jesus as their power. They're claiming Jesus is for them, and this is the right thing to do, right?
Yes.
So it's to me, it's even a more egregious, like, it's no longer like this power that we have in the flesh. Like, they're literally claiming spiritual power, which is bizarre to me. It's just bizarre.
I didn't know what you were about to say when you said it's just, and then you started with a B, and I was like, oh, you're going to cuss right here. So, no, bizarre.
I'm a loose cannon, but this is the riff. I got to keep it clean. I know. But it's a bizarre thing to me, and I want to get your take on it. What do you think? All right, here we go. I'm going to put you on the spot. This is the riff, and we haven't talked about this.
All right,
it's the riff, right? I want two things from you that are indicators that you're heading down the wrong path with power.
Okay. If Jesus hates the same people you hate, okay, that's indicator number one. Second thing.
Dig into that.
If my perception of Jesus just makes me louder and doesn't change the way I think, just makes me validated in what I think and care less about what other people think, it's not Jesus. Not according to Scripture. You look at the Scripture, and one of the big challenges is Jesus was always trying to get people to say, hey, love this person. You're not loving them well. Your neighbor. And then people are like, well, who do you say is my neighbor, right? And people are having this argument over, do I really have to like you, love you, serve you, in these kind of settings? And so if everybody I hate or dislike, we wouldn't say the word hate, also Jesus dislikes, then I'm wrong. That means there's no part of my life that's saying, Jesus, where am I wrong? Who do you love that I don't love? Second thing is this: if Jesus gives me the power to dominate over others, then that's the second red flag, I would say, because Jesus' power is to be with us when we are dominated. Jesus' power is to be able to say, not my will, but yours be done, God. Jesus' power is to be on the cross and to say, Father, forgive them. They don't know what I'm doing. We would interpret that sometimes as, Jesus, your power, when they try and put me on the cross, I'm going to subdue them and I'm going to nail them to the cross. And that's what you get. Don't persecute me, right? And I'm not saying that we shouldn't have rights. I'm not saying as humans or even as Christians. What I'm saying is what we ought to do is fight for the dignity of others. And in doing so, in dignifying others, protecting others, serving others, it hurts us a little bit. That's all right, right? So I just feel like we need to be very careful. So those two indicators: does Jesus agree with me, and are my enemies Jesus' enemies? If I always think that, that's the number one. And number two is he helping me dominate and get really mad when I have to be treated like a servant?
They're so good, man.
So yeah, I feel like that's an issue.
It's interesting too, because I think those are two examples that I think you could be like, oh yeah, those are red flags.
Yeah.
I have found myself, and I think through these past 2 weeks, I loved overcoming and challenging
phenomenal.
in different ways and seeing a different way that he believes and see all this kind of stuff, because it made me really sit down and think, like, I don't have Jesus figured out.
Right.
And when I do think that, like, for me, that's the red flag.
Yeah.
Because in my mind, I'm like, he doesn't hate the people I don't hate. You know what I mean? Like, it's...
Yeah.
But I'm like, I feel really comfortable when I'm not challenged by Jesus. When I can read the words and I can read stories, I can read other books about it and just learn knowledge.
Yeah.
I feel really good. But I don't think that's like, I'm with you. I don't think that's the key. Yeah, I don't think he's here to to tell me I'm right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, learning about him is different, right? Certainty. Yeah, I mean, that's what you're talking about, is certainty. The more certainty you have, I think the more nervous you ought to be. Just because it's such a mystery. It's such a mystery. And it doesn't mean I don't have confidence.
Right.
It doesn't mean I don't have confidence in who he is and my reflection of him and what he has called me to do. But certainty in areas just leads to arrogance and nothing that looks like Jesus. So I feel like that's an issue. You know, like if we look back on even like the COVID season, like I'm not a medical professional.
Whoa. You are a doctor.
Yeah, not that kind. But
For real?
well,
I
yeah.
have been led astray.
Well, hey,
What?
I you know, it doesn't mean I don't have opinions.
Okay, great.
So like the last thing I ever care about, and I'm not a scientist, so I'm I'm not a mask guy, I'm not a non-mask guy, I'm not a vax guy, I'm not an anti-vaxxer, I am none of that. None of that is a passion for me. And sometimes when one of those on either side is not your passion, you're lumped into, well, then you must be, no, okay? Especially the further we're removed from COVID, like I couldn't care less on a lot of these rules and regulations of, you know, because it changes and people don't know. But here's the thing as I look back on is the attitude is a big deal. An attitude that says, don't tell me what to do, because you are infringing on my rights as a Christian, because maybe we have to meet differently for a season during a pandemic, or even if you didn't believe it was a pandemic, what's perceived as a pandemic and no one else is able to gather, okay? If everybody is able to gather everywhere, but they say, however, the churches cannot, then I would say that almost sounds like discrimination, and it wouldn't be the first time in human history. And what do? But when nobody's allowed to gather, for us to demand that we should be the only ones to do so, And again, this has nothing to do with the pandemic. This has nothing to do with no mass vaccinations, vaccinations. This is to do with, in a time of human history when no one is gathering, for someone to say the fact that we're not able to be the only ones to gather is persecution. I'm like, come on, that's ridiculous. And why I think it's a big deal, because that's what we're talking about, is how dare you come against me,
power.
Right? No, it's not about power.
Yeah.
It's watch what happens. Watch what happens when we serve and we take upon ourselves the form of a servant and begin to love others like Jesus did. Is the mission. That's what Jesus did. That's the great emptying is what they call that passage in Philippians of Jesus. And I think as Christians we ought to look at the emptying. Are we emptying? The other thing is power could be perverted. Like when all of a sudden I say, hey, because I'm a follower of Jesus Christ, right? Because I've got Jesus in my pocket, now I can get away with stuff. I can treat people differently. I just feel like that's a whole different level of judgment that we sign up for. Because we're responsible for what we know, and to whom much is given, much is required. And so
That was Mark Twain, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's Samuel Clemens.
Oh, okay.
Is his real name. So I just know this. Like for me, I think there's a big responsibility of good, bad, or ugly, because we're in the 21st century. Church doesn't look like it did in the first century. Okay, and Ofer joked about it. We got video venue campuses. This is different. This is bizarre to an outsider. I get that. It's bizarre in the world of history that we have a church the way it is. It's bizarre that's my job. Okay, we both work at a church.
Right.
Very few in the last 100 years. That's the only time it's been normal. Okay,
Right.
that someone could say that. Okay, I think we have responsibility now. If I now use power to make people serve me, to make people bow to the system, that's the very sin of the early religious people who had power. Their job as Levites and priests and religious leaders was to serve the people, and they figured out a way that in order to serve the people, they actually were the ones that represented access to God. And if I could leverage this spot of serving to a spot of power, and that's what happened. And that's why Jesus started flipping tables and whipping the straps around, because he's saying, man, you have perverted the very mission of being a servant, and you've been power hungry. And power, when you feed power, man, it turns into a monster. And so we've got to watch it. I think that would be helpful. Is what are some things we can do as Christians to be able to make sure power doesn't, a thirst for power doesn't creep in?
I think community.
Yeah.
I've been able to see power go weird, and anytime that has happened, it's been isolation. And I'm not saying that happens every time.
Yeah.
But I just think it's a lot harder to get power hungry when you have other people around you. As long as those other people are also not power hungry. But
well, that's a whole thing right there.
Yes.
because then that's the emperor who has no clothes.
Exactly.
And I don't want to tell you because I want a better spot with the emperor.
Right.
Right.
So the right kind of community would be what I would say. I think that's something that's probably
which
needed.
goes to, if you hold your role loosely. Okay, like for you, okay, in your role right now, and you probably have more access to me than anybody on our team. If you hold your role loosely and your job is to say, hey, I'm not trying to keep my job, I'm trying to serve this mission, then it's easy for you to have a conversation with me when I'm power hungry. If you hold your role tightly, then it's going to be awkward for you because it might risk your role. Same with me. If I'm holding my role tightly, if I want to be the lead pastor of North Point Church as long as I can, I'm going to make decisions that are self-preservation oriented. And I'm going to remove people who could in any way be a threat to that. If I hold it loosely, I want to think mission first, and then my role.
I think that's probably for me, that's been the most important thing I've learned from you. Is that aspect of, specifically when it comes to a role, wherever you are, like that whole idea of, if you hold on to this and you think you're driving it, you're actually wrecking it. Like that for me, it just changed a lot of stuff for me. I mean, it's. So I don't know where you are as a listener, but I would definitely challenge you with that kind of a thing. Yeah, because it is so counterintuitive. Because there's so many times that I still am like, no, I got to control this or do that. But I'm just like, why?
Yeah.
Like, for what reason? Like, for
Yeah.
me? Like, because I want to like, I don't, yeah. I mean, it's the whole longevity and essentiality thing. Like, at the end of the day, I'm like, I don't honestly care how long I'm here. I really don't.
Yeah.
And I can truly say that.
Yeah.
I really care if it matters, though.
Yes, that's
I
it.
really, really care if it matters.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, because I care so much that it matters, it ends up making me want to control it. So, you know what I mean? Like, it's just this constant, yeah.
I think also for the listener, how do you check yourself? Is one, I don't believe our job is to get power. Okay, we can put that in God's hands. God will give us power, opportunity, influence, impact, however He would define that. God will give us the freedom. That's His job. Our job is to be the servant. Our job is to push the reflection of the love of Jesus outwards. So in our community. Now, the truth is, we have more influence and rights as Christians in this nation compared to any other nation. And when we even compare it to any other time period, if you think of big time world history, I don't think people are going to feel bad for us, right? So God's doing a great job on giving us opportunity, impact, and influence. Let's not focus on that. Let's focus on how do we then serve others and love others. How do you know if you're a servant? Here's a quick litmus test. How did you feel the last time someone treated you like a servant? Like, for me, that's a good check. If I'm like, I can't believe it, they acted like I'm their servant. Okay, that's just a good red flag that I don't try and serve people, right? So, and that's fine. It doesn't make you bad if you think those thoughts, but just catch yourself and say, okay, how can I serve my neighbors? How can I serve my community? How can I serve the people at my work today? How can I serve my kids? Am I tugging on the leash, right? Mm-hmm. Am I loving? Am I leading with love? Power is great because it's influence. And I think power is gained by serving others, and rarely is serving others gained by having more power. So let's focus on that one and let God take care of the rest. So
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to be power hungry and take people's time. We're at the limit.
Yeah.
The clock turned red.
Wow.
I mean, I don't know how long ago it turned red, but it's red.
But I feel like that's because we're counting in some of the things. We didn't give 30 minutes of content, that's for sure. We only gave about 4 minutes of content.
I was gonna say maybe 5.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
But there was a lot of stuff. I still got a splinter right here.
That's right.
Sorry. I still got a sliver.
yes, you do.
Yeah, it's getting red.
Those nails, man.
Yeah.
You been
honestly,
chewing on them?
Yeah. Yeah.
We'll talk about that in another episode.
That's
but you ought to watch
rough
online
habit,
there.
man.
Hey, thanks for tuning in. Next Monday morning, set your alarm if you can, and we'll see you on another episode of The Riff.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Riff. We'll have a brand new episode every week, wherever you find podcasts.